Story 1. Not realizing the subtle hints of manipulation before I moved in with them is now clear to me. I have learned to spot them, but ending up homeless in Los Angeles was quite unfortunate. Story 2. The cheating, his falling in love with another woman, and my begging him to love me just a little more as long as he didn't leave. The physical abuse. Being strangled and thinking about how heartbroken my son will be when he finds out I'm gone. The constant put-downs. Telling me I'm worthless and that no one wants me. The constant stress and looking over my shoulder because the cheating never stopped. The confusion because, at times, he was the sweetest person, the only one I felt was on the same wavelength as me. I am fundamentally a different person because of that relationship. Story 3. Abuse started with emotional manipulation and progressed. Unfortunately, this has become a normal relationship for me. On a positive note, I've taken several years off from dating, partly due to my inability to recognize warning signs. I also need to work on my self-esteem. Story 4. Abuse, manipulation, and lying over small issues for no apparent reason. Inability to handle trauma or unwillingness to heal. Lack of motivation or action to evolve, and immaturity. Story 5. The random calls to their mobile phone disappeared for a weekend, claiming they left their phone in the car and the battery died. They traveled to the United States for work and took additional time, stating they met an old friend and proposed to them to obtain a visa so they wouldn't be kicked out of the country. I was young and naive, but I knew deep down that it was a bad situation and I should have ended it sooner. Story 6. His unhealthy relationship with his mother takes apron strings to a whole new level. She interferes in everything, making family events bizarrely awkward to the point that the rest of the family thinks it is really odd. I could write a book. Story 7. The way my ex-wife treated service staff, such as waiters and clerks in department stores, was cruel. I found it distasteful, but I never did anything to stop it. Story 8. I had to give her actions and mistakes the benefit of the doubt, whereas I was always my own worst critic. It's a major rule I have for future partners. A little bit of hypocrisy is human, but I will not tolerate standards demanded of me that are not reciprocated. Yes, I know it's obvious, and I'm still regretting it years later. Story 9. She ended her future roommate's relationship because she didn't know the woman and didn't want a stranger in her house. Now, she expresses openly racist views. She will deny it and claim that she doesn't feel safe, but it's consistently directed at an Indian man. Story 10. Talking all the time can sometimes lead to misunderstandings. Some people do not recognize the importance of silence and feel compelled to fill the air with their voices. Story 11. Abuse was primarily physical. I justified it by thinking that it wasn't that bad, that it was my fault she was upset, and that I deserved it. Eventually, it escalated to the point where she would attack me and taunt me to hit her back, claiming that since I was a guy, no one would believe me that she had started it. Story 12. His self-focus and self-prioritization were outright narcissistic, and I wanted to pretend it wasn't so bad. How foolish I was. Story 13. He watched me cry after triggering me on something, and he would sit there and watch without saying a word, even though I begged him to say something, anything. It was the most torturous experience I've ever had. I should have left but didn't. Now I realize he was triggering my trauma from my parents. Luckily, right after him, I found my now husband, and we've been together for 5 years. Story 14. When he continually disrespected his ex-girlfriends, he neglected to take care of himself. He would do small things like throwing his belongings on my books, even after I asked him to be mindful of where he placed his things. Story 15. When he slept with someone else, he gave me an ultimatum that if I didn't move in with him, he would do it again. I was young and naive. He ended up trying to harm me twice. We are divorced, and I have post-traumatic stress disorder. Story 16. He kept me in the dark about all finances. All mail was sent to his office, leaving all responsibilities for me to handle, although he had promised he wouldn't do that. I did not want to have the life my mother had, but that's exactly what I got. Story 17. When my grandma died, I had to beg him for even an ounce of support. He lied to me about using cocaine behind my back. He couldn't stop mixing cocaine and alcohol, becoming verbally aggressive. We compromised that he would only use one or the other, but he broke that promise within a week. He told me nobody is ever going to love me the way he does because I'm too emotional. He said he didn't support abortions after he wanted me to get one. I continuously begged for the bare minimum, only to be told I was asking too much. I realize now how naive I was. Story 18, he had a violent temper. He never raised a finger to me, but at various points, he punched a hole in his wall as a teenager and somehow managed to tear down a bathroom stall at a restaurant. He was a reckless driver and thought he was in a fast-paced car chase. The only thing that prompted me to finally leave was when he cheated on me. When I look back, I'm pretty certain that if I had stayed, he would have become violent toward me, or I would have been hurt in a car accident. I heard a year or so later that he was involved in a crash with his younger brother, and it was serious. Story 19, withholding affection. Always changing the standards for what I should do to receive a small amount of attention from him. He could find time for everyone but me. It felt like living with a roommate. The only difference was that we shared a bed. Story 20. I truly believe that we choose to stay in relationships that conflict with our personalities and values only because of a lack of clarity and confidence in our purpose. Story 21. Saying something to hurt me on purpose, specifically using these two phrases. Did that feel like a punch? Because it was supposed to. And I did it out of love. You left me with no choice. Story 22. Their continuous allegations of my dishonesty were unfounded. I would never cheat. It turned out they were the ones in the wrong. I never thought to question them. It's quite disheartening. Story 23. I don't like lies, not even small ones. If you can lie about something insignificant, then you can lie about absolutely anything, like my ex. I am also quick to shut down any gaslighting or any form of manipulation. I don't tolerate any of it anymore. Story 24. He used a derogatory term. I wanted to end it right then and there, but my spine was broken, and I had nowhere to go. I will always regret putting up with it. Bigotry is unacceptable. Story 25. When he hit my mom in the face during an argument over who was going to wipe my son's bottom, I believe they were both wrong, and I still do. It should have indicated his willingness to strike a woman over something trivial. My mom was worse, making him the lesser of two evils. Years of abuse and manipulation shaped who I am, but I still wish I had left sooner, 20 years before things fell into place for me to leave. I am much happier now. Story 26. Her untrained pug. Responsible dog owners do not allow their pets to relieve themselves indoors. Story 27. Him, 19. What would you change about me if you could change anything? Me, 17. Nothing. I love you as you are. Him, well, you've gained some weight. I don't know why I stayed another year. Wait, yes I do, horrible daddy issues. Also, I absolutely was not overweight. I was going through puberty. Story 28. Everything feels overwhelming. I am attempting to maintain a confident appearance in front of others, resorting to small lies and altering the truth. Story 29. She was mean for no reason and always had a snarky attitude about everything. Looking back, I thought the sass was somewhat charming, but now I realize she was just unpleasant. Story 30. When he gave me 3 chances in our arguments, I knew I had to make them count. I ended up breaking things off with him after the first argument. He also pressured me to get a part-time job so I could contribute more to our dates. I was a senior in high school, and he was in his final year of university. Story 31. He worked on the road, so he was gone a lot. He was playful about the clothes I could wear when he was away. I would get something new, and he'd say, "Oh, better only wear that when I'm around," and be cute about it. My mother has a large group of friends, typically all married, with a few single women. I would be accused of sleeping with the married men while I was at these pool parties with my children. He would scream at me for an hour about what a terrible person I was, then tell me he couldn't look at me anymore and hang up. He would call me back later, crying, saying he didn't mean to talk to me like that. I ended up comforting him and apologizing. He was the one cheating on me 3 times that I know of over the course of our relationship. Story 32. He was dishonest. He deceived people constantly and expected me to just accept it. He also claimed that he did not lie to me, and I believed him. I was 17 and really wish I had re-examined that claim before we got divorced at 30. He was very manipulative and controlling. The emotional abuse left a lasting psychological impact. Story 33. Aside from the obvious issues, such as being physically violent, creating conflict between myself and other men, or glorifying emotional instability, I would say that my first serious girlfriend being almost 9 years my senior when I was 14 is definitely a major red flag that signals the need to leave. Story 34. Not very trusting and could be immature and super jealous. He also never took his phone off Do Not Disturb, but I couldn't do that or he might think I lost interest. Story 35. Being close friends with many girls, it turns out he had been involved with half of them and was planning to pursue the rest. Story 36. Her ordering me to carve her name into my leg, as she originally wanted me to cut the veins in my ankle because the guy she liked rejected her, was alarming. I should have left much earlier, but she was depressed, and I was worried she would harm herself. Story 37. When he continuously criticized my choices, my methods, or my appearance under the guise of just trying to help, he was a great dad but a disappointing husband. Story 38. Many things happened, but a significant one was him using benzodiazepines with a girl, taking his parents' car for a joyride, crashing it, and cheating with that girl all on the same day, 3 months into our relationship. Low self-esteem, especially as a young person, can lead you to accept many things. Story 39. Getting excessively drunk every weekend, combined with his tendency to flirt, led to the revelation that there was significant boundary crossing and outright infidelity. Story 40. Many factors are at play, but one that stands out is the lack of appreciation and gratitude for the things I did for him. Without appreciation, people tend to take you for granted and fail to recognize your value. Story 41. When we broke up, she dated someone else. I didn't care about any of the guys before me, but after me, it was a different story. When we got back together, I wanted to discuss what bothered me about her moving on with another person so quickly, but she was always too stressed to talk about it. I needed to know why she did things with another guy that she would never do with me, even though I was supposedly the love of her life. This happened to me with 2 different exes. The first one explained that she didn't see me as someone she wanted a passionate relationship with, but more of a steady one. So I said, okay, then we should break up. The second one just didn't want to discuss it at all. Story 42. He never brushed his teeth and acted as if I were being insane and unreasonable for asking him to do so. Story 43. An old friend of mine was visiting, and I was having a great time talking with him while my ex was alone in his bedroom. My ex could have joined in the conversation. I had no idea this was manipulative behavior and even apologized, but it still felt strange. Emotional abuse eventually escalated into domestic violence. Story 44. The threats and clinginess were overwhelming. He wouldn't let me spend time with my friends and would complain if I wanted to do my own thing. He even threatened to harm himself if I didn't dedicate my time to him. I genuinely felt trapped with no way out. However, my best friend, who is now my boyfriend, stayed by my side during my ex's toxic behavior and supported me through other tough times as well. I am really glad to be with my boyfriend now. He has been my support for a long time. Story 45. Do you know what you need to do? Why did I need to change my career? From early in the relationship, she believed she was sent to change me, but my career was the only part of my life that made me truly happy. The relationship involved constant attacks on my self-image. Story 46. Weaponized incompetence. Flirting with others while denying it. Reminiscing about previous relationships. Lack of ambition. Excessive alcohol use. Numerous excuses. Poor health habits. Victim mentality. Poor hygiene. Immature behavior and dependency on parents. Story 47. When he yelled at me while drunk that I didn't deserve a higher salary than he had, despite his general educational development certificate and my Ivy League PhD, it was concerning. He had specifically searched for women with higher education who indicated they were okay with a partner earning less, as he was a person seeking financial support from others. His mentioning of this topic on the first date should have been my first red flag. If you don't fully understand human depravity and that a significant portion of the population lacks emotional empathy, it becomes easier to fall for such behavior. Story 48. Seeing how his father treated his mother. Noticing the little bottles of antidepressants and anxiety medication tucked into the corner of the kitchen with her name on them. Story 49. There were many issues, but the most significant was when he cheated. I stayed for 2 more months and then he left me. Never again. Story 50. Lying, gaslighting, standing me up, speaking poorly about my friends, laughing at my pain, and having unappealing tattoos. Story 51. Not sure if it falls into the leave immediately category, but he had some concerning incidents with alcohol looking back. Before we were officially dating, he lightheartedly mentioned that he drove drunk to work for his 5 a.m. shift at Starbucks but showed up late enough that they just told him to go home. I was freshly 18 at the time and didn't perceive how irresponsible that was. He also drank a bottle of mead alone for no apparent reason one night. He threw up from drinking too much nearly every time he drank, but that was only a few times a semester. To some people, that might seem like a few isolated incidents that are not overtly problematic for a college-aged individual, but it was concerning to me. After we broke up, he ended up getting a driving under the influence charge that he is still contesting. Additionally, little things like significant financial irresponsibility, accumulating about $5,000 in credit card debt at 21 on top of $30,000 in student loans, being unable to get himself up in time for the classes he was paying for, and failing classes that I knew he was capable of passing were red flags. I stuck around to see if he was just going through a rough patch or if this was his character. I hope for his sake that it is a rough patch he grows out of, but he didn't grow out of it soon enough for me. Story 52. Very controversial opinion, but pornography, even after I explained my reasoning and how it makes me feel, continued despite their earlier promise to stop. Story 53. She woke me up with an overly indulgent breakfast the morning after bonding the night before and cooked for me, all while she was still in a relationship. I should have known that this would not end well. Story 54. Not really an ex, but grabbing my scalp and screaming when I asked them not to eat in my bed. I know, how do you justify that to yourself? Loneliness does strange things to your brain, I don't know. Story 55. Possessiveness. Leaving my family to move to a new place with just us. Increased chauvinism. Early signs of narcissism that I ignored. Story 56. Her constant sarcasm and slightly mean-spirited comments were exhausting. I appreciate a little sarcasm and spice, but being rude all the time gets old. I tolerated it for far too long. Story 57. Her use, her lack of boundaries with male friends, her telling me she hates me when she didn't get her way. Honestly, I can keep going on. But when you desperately want someone to be the one. Story 58. I'll call it the roommate effect. They don't grow out of college roommate mode in terms of responsibilities and actions around the house. It's almost completely give and take, as in you give and they take until they are held responsible for giving back. You could leave a dish out, rinsed and all, right above the dishwasher, and they would leave it there for a week because they know they didn't leave it. However, they won't clean up their own mess if you haven't. It's just constant petty issues. You have to basically barter to do more labor just so they will do something. Story 59. He was one of those alcoholics who appeared to be functional at times. He could hold down a job and earn a good income because it was a skilled trade. However, whenever he went on a bender, chaos would ensue. He struggled with alcohol and drugs, ending up in the hospital on multiple occasions due to severe withdrawal symptoms that could have been fatal. He has overdosed nearly a dozen times. Last year, he spent a month in the hospital due to organ failure related to alcohol use. It has been many years now, and occasionally I miss him. When he was sober, he was a great guy. Funny, thoughtful, a good cook, and he was supportive of my personal problems. However, I will never again be involved with someone who has such severe issues that they experience incontinence while asleep. Story 60. Putting her family, especially her sister, before me. I feel exhausted and just want a restful weekend, yet I suddenly become full of energy when her sister wants to go out. Story 61. The constant need to be coddled is something her entire circle does. It resembles the worst aspects of 2012 Tumblr, but these individuals have children, whom they neglect while pretending it is normal to laugh about their cravings for nicotine and marijuana. They refuse to refrain from smoking around their kids or treat them as a nuisance because the children desire interaction instead of being left alone with cartoons or games. Her treatment of her daughter was the last straw, but there were numerous warning signs beforehand. Story 62. Trying to control small things like clothing can be counterproductive. Feeling insecure about others in your life is common but can be detrimental to relationships. It is important not to confuse protectiveness with possessiveness. In the beginning, possessiveness may appear as cute overprotectiveness. Story 63. Manipulating and guilt-tripping me back into the relationship by saying that being called manipulative hurts is understandable. I found out that I have narcissistic personality disorder. Story 64. I chased this girl for years. I was infatuated with her, and she knew it. She would use me for various things, including money and emotional support, while she dated total losers. She would break up and come running to me, giving me some hope, only to get back together with her boyfriend and put me back in the friend zone. Story 65. Silent treatment for days after doing something they didn't like, such as watching my favorite streamer who made me smile. This was considered bad because they would say, "How would you like it if the love of your life smiled about another person?" Story 66. When you take breaks, the only thing you told him that made you feel secure was that he couldn't control his actions, but he did so anyway. Story 67. Little hints of manipulation and signs of deceit started to emerge. There was a complete shutdown of our intimate life after we moved in together, along with constant criticism and controlling behavior directed towards me. I assumed it was just a rough patch and tolerated it for 4 years before things finally came to an end. If you find yourself in a similar situation and are considering ending it, do it. It does get better, you just need to be strong for a little while. After that challenging relationship, I met the woman who is now my wife. Story 68. Jealousy. She was terrible. When you get a female server at a restaurant, they usually ask how your day is going. If I said anything other than what I wanted to order, it became an issue after leaving. That didn't last long, and I ghosted her. Story 69. I did not trust my instincts when I discovered that she had sent nude photos on Snapchat for rent money. She manipulated her way out of the situation. Story 70. Controlling behavior included not being allowed to shop for food or ingredients by myself or decide on my own what to cook. I had to prepare, cook, have it ready at precise times, and then clean up afterward. There were arguments over how I spent money I earned, even $1, while I was not allowed to have input on how the money they earned was spent. Next came restrictions on how I wore my hair, which clothes I could wear to work, what color lipstick was considered inappropriate, and which shoes were seen as provocative to other men. Then I left. Story 71. I contacted my mother to tell her I felt mean and wanted her help to prevent me from breaking up with him. Honestly, I should have ended the relationship and distanced myself from my mother the first time it happened. Story 72. He reacted strongly to me for making a lighthearted joke about his car with his neighbors. I responded that I didn't really like his car. He shouted that it made him look foolish, and I genuinely thought he was going to start throwing things in his room or punching the walls. It was an excessive overreaction, but he was so manipulative that I felt like I had truly done something wrong. Story 73. He would confront me if I got near his phone. I went through it multiple times when he was asleep and discovered that 90% of his pictures were screenshots of girls, some of whom were my friends. Story 74. Very subtle manipulations and control, inflating minor issues to use later as tools for manipulation. Story 75. There were many issues, but he was extremely messy. I don't know how I tolerated it for so long. I am very happy to no longer be with him. Story 76. Her transformation into a mean, sarcastic person happened suddenly. She had bipolar disorder and did not take medication, and 75% of the time, her hypomania manifested as complete irritation, reacting aggressively to anything. Story 77. Being constantly pressured for intimacy. Just as I'm about to leave for the fair, there's a request for a quick encounter until I finally agree, just so we can go. This happened all the time. Story 78. When I was in university, I was with a boyfriend for 3 years who constantly compared himself to my ex-boyfriend in a pathetic way. For example, he would say, "You dyed your hair pink when you were with him. It's not fair that you don't do that anymore." He also said, "You told me you did this once before with him and didn't like it, but it's not fair because you won't let me do it to you." Story 79. Getting upset with me when I made an honest mistake was uncalled for. The mistake occurred during a road trip. I packed the cooler and, not thinking, I placed a Tupperware container of soba noodles on its side. Some ice melted and water got into the container. The noodles were still edible and we ended up eating them. However, when he found water in the noodles, he made disrespectful remarks and was very passive-aggressive. On another occasion, he snatched a phone out of my hand because he was frustrated with how I was handling a difficult phone call. Even after I asked him if he would prefer to make the call himself but insisted that I do it. I should have ended the relationship after 1 month. Instead, I stayed with him for 18 months. Story 80. His cheating, lying, and abusive actions towards me included irrational threats and troubling behaviors. He had an inappropriate relationship with his mother and engaged in unsettling behavior with his female dog, which ultimately passed away. His drug use was primarily cocaine. He also picked his nose and ate it, concealed his bisexuality, and cheated on me with both men and women. I could go on, unfortunately. You have no idea the challenges I faced with this person. Story 81. He asked me to send screenshots of my recent text messages and call log to ensure I wasn't texting or calling any guys. If I didn't send them within 10 seconds, he would get really angry and assume I was deleting information. Story 82. He was anxiously attached and would not leave me alone. It was nice when I wasn't busy, but otherwise it became overwhelming and I felt suffocated. He was also extremely jealous, and this has definitely altered my relationships since then. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.